Where to begin? I want to start by saying how very, very grateful I am for every person who has reached out to me via text, phone call, social media, whatever you did to reach out. I just want to say thank you for taking the time to do that and truly making me feel supported right now when it feels weird, because it's like I know I didn't even receive the worst of what I'm referring to happened. And so to get this level of support, I think it's just I'm not used to it. So it feels strange in a way, but I want to say thank you. It literally means more to me than you will ever know. I'm still finding my voice in all of this, and there are going to be moments of awkwardness. At least for me, it feels that way. But thank you for being gentle with me. Thank you for not criticizing me. At least no one has yet. But just letting me find a flow in order to do this, because again, the more I share, the better I feel afterward and just overall. And so thank you for being a safe place for me to express myself, share my truth without judgment, criticism, or negativity. Doing all this would be so much easier if I felt like I hated the pastor, right? If I felt like he was just scum of the earth and, I never had a positive experience with him. Talking about all of this, I think, would be easier, but I don't hate him. I love him. I do. And I think that anybody who can relate to being in a relationship with someone, whatever kind of relationship that is, that can be a best friend who betrays your trust. It can be a spouse, right? You can't just turn off the love switch because something negative takes place. And so I say that to say doing this would be easy if I hated him, but I don't. I've always looked to him like a dad. And so this whole thing has been earth-shattering in more ways than one. He probably doesn't feel like I love him, and that's okay. Tough love is still love, but it doesn't feel like it when you're receiving it. And God deals with us the same way. It's honestly very similar, I would say equivalent to the Bill Cosby effect. You have some people who will never believe that what he did was true. You have some people who may believe it, but because it didn't happen to them personally, they're just totally emotionally removed from it, and so it doesn't really affect them. Then you have people who may believe it, but A, it either didn't happen to them personally, or B, they have such a different relationship with the person than what's being described by people. They have a positive, loving relationship and experience to the point that they cannot really see the same type of person that you're describing in that individual. And because of that, they can't disassociate from the person. I just want you to know, I get it. And I'm not judging you. I know you're conflicted, and I'm praying for you, because I had that same feeling. I had this feeling of, maybe I just didn't, read that right. Maybe that's not what he meant. I just did not want to think that any of this was what it was. And the more I share, though, the more it's been confirmed by others who have come out with their stories. Painful stories of a truth much darker than what I even experienced. And so for that, I'm grateful to be speaking out, because other people are coming forward and they may not ever want to be public with it this way. I don't know why, I feel that this is the way that I'm supposed to do it, but I'm trusting God through this process. This has affected so many people, and in a way that still makes me very sad when I think about it. But every time I have a moment of sadness, something happens. One of you reaches out, someone says or does something to let me know that me doing this is the right thing. Knowing that it would affect so many people is exactly what kept me from saying anything to begin with, at least publicly. I thought about his wife. I thought about his kids, who are adults. They're not children, but still. His family, his friends, other members of the church. I had all of you on my mind for such a long time, and I need you to know that, which is why I did not say something as soon as it happened. I needed to process this. I needed to know that I wasn't acting out of my emotions when I did it. I wanted to handle this as rightly as I could. And that ultimately means that I have to speak the truth. I know some people may wonder, well, why do you have to say it out loud? Why do you have to do it this way? I can't really explain to you why, but I can tell you this is consistent with the way that God deals with me. The way that he uses me to speak up and advocate and speak the truth even when it's hard has been a pattern of my life. And this can't be treated any different. I was carrying the hurt that I had from this situation, but before I started speaking out about it, I was also carrying all of that hurt that I knew would come when you all learned it. But that weight got to be too heavy, and it was never meant for me to carry anyway. I distinctly remember writing in my journal one day about this whole situation and feeling like I was hearing God just trying to get this message to me, like, who are you? Who did I make you to be? What are you supposed to do? What's your purpose? Like, all these questions were just flooding. What have I called you to do? And the first thing that came to my mind that really could have answered all of those was to speak truth. That's what I know I'm supposed to do. And that's when it just became more and more evident that I had to share. So I hope you understand that. Not everyone feels that conviction to speak out like this. I get that. I'm fine with that. But I need you to be fine with the fact that just because you may not be that way, maybe that's not what God has for you to do in situations, it does not mean that those of us who feel that that's what we have to do in order to be free, liberated from the situations that have held us back, this is the way that we process. It's the way that God uses us, and I need you to respect that too. I also had to remind myself that all these people that I was carrying inside of me, thinking about how they would be so hurt if they knew that this happened, and this is why I should just keep quiet because it's gonna hurt so many people. I had to realize I'm not the one that hurt them. If I speak the truth, that is actually an act of love. He's the one that did his wrongdoings, and me speaking out is simply a consequence of that. I'm not the one hurting you. So I also wanted to explain something that I shared in the last video, just saying that I sought counsel on what to do in the situation. And what I meant by that is that I was deliberate about the fact that I wanted to speak to people who were spiritual, wise, that could help me process what took place, in a way validate, because there was part of me that was like, well, am I looking at this the wrong way? So I needed to know that I wasn't, and I needed to know what to do with that, because I couldn't just sit in it. I needed to know what to do with all of that gunk that was piling up inside of me because of this situation. I wanted to know how to handle it the right way because I've never been through something exactly like this. And you would be surprised at how many people, they don't want their hands in this kind of thing at all. Rather than show love, be there for you, try to support, even privately, they will just back all the way up and tell you, look, I really can't make any comments on that. And I had to get comfortable with the fact that some people are dealing with their own stuff. Hearing about something like this can actually make them pause and think about their own lifestyle, their own choices, and really determine whether or not they're in a place where they can address what someone else is doing without having to address themselves. But it does bring me back to that question that I asked, which is, so what do I do? What do people like me do in this situation when we are going to people who feel as though they can't get involved for one reason or another? Where does that leave us? Where do people in the church go when they have these types of problems? That is a question that I feel like every church needs to ask, and they need to figure out what the plan of action will be in situations like this, because though we hate to hear about it, though we hate that it happens, this is nothing new. And unfortunately, I'm definitely not the first person who's ever experienced something like this, and I won't be the last. And so it should be a wake-up call to churches, not just my situation. I'm talking about what's going on worldwide. And my situation just so happens to relate to that, to relate to all the other issues that we hear about happening in the church. I don't hear enough people talking about it, so I want to. I feel it's necessary. I think that other churches should be talking about the whole scandals and things that we see. Why? Because we need to help people know how to process it and how to handle it. The whole Ravi Zacharias and Carl Lentz situations, not to call them out and demonize them, but churches should be talking about these things so that we can figure out, how do we process them when they happen? What do we do when it's someone that we know and love? Someone who's up close and personal in our own lives. How do we handle it then? It's easy to judge it when it's somebody who seems so far away, but what do we do when it's at our own home, in our own church? And we don't talk about it enough to equip people on how to handle these situations. When I thought that this was potentially a one-time offense, that maybe he just had a slip up. You know, we get tired in ministry, there's burnout, but just as people, right? You get tired and your exhaustion can cause you to do dumb stuff. I know. So when I thought that maybe it was just this one time, and I was willing to just never go to the church again, just move on, not talk about it. And part of that is because I don't think I advocate for myself the way that I need to. And so when I learned that there were other victims, there were other people who had gone through this with this individual, many of them with way worse situations and experiences than what I even went through in this situation, that's when I knew I had to speak up. There was a part of me that still wanted to protect this person's reputation. I know that sounds sad. I guess maybe a better way to say it is that I didn't want to be the reason why their reputation fell apart. I don't ever want to be responsible for someone's downfall. It's just not a position that I want to be in. I never have wanted that. And it's not even that I'm the one doing it. Men who do things like this, people who do things like this, they're doing it to themselves. But you get what I'm saying. I didn't want to have to be the one to say something. Now, some of you have a different personality type. You would have had no problem putting homeboy on Front Street. You would have named him and pulled up the receipts, because I got receipts. But I'm just not wired that way. I also realized that we're all one decision away, potentially, from being publicly humiliated in one way or another. So it's like I'm actively choosing to tread lightly here. Just don't catch me on a bad day. Another thing that I wanted to bring up that I think maybe some people were concerned about is just that I do not plan to just throw away the past 8 years of my life where I was a part of this ministry and very active in that ministry because of this situation. I'm not going to discount every single thing that I experienced, learned, got, received from that church. I'm merely taking the meat and throwing out the bones. What am I saying? I'm taking what was good and profitable for my spirit, and I'm holding on to it, and I'm letting go of the rest. Someone might ask, well, how do you know what to take and what not to take, what to pick up and keep and what to throw out? And that's a valid point. In the end, I could question everything, but then I would literally be questioning the past 8 years of my life. And I think that that's just a mental journey that I'm not supposed to try to rewind everything. I can simply look back and recognize, was it good for me? Did it feed me spiritually? Was it profitable for me inwardly? Did it help me increase my faith and my relationship with God? If the answer is yes, I'm keeping it. If the answer is no or iffy, I'm letting it go. Because here's the thing, you know that God can use any situation to bring good to us, right? So what was meant for evil, God works together for good. Stop trying to make me preach. Okay, so it wouldn't be fair for me to not share with you some of the ways in which I feel I'm still processing everything that happened and the hurt and pain that is still resident that I'm actively working to evict and get out of my life. So I do want to be clear that the pastor never touched me, groped me, fondled me. There was none of that in this situation. I mean, maybe a hug here or there that was a little tighter than I wanted it to be, but besides that. But because those things have happened to me in my life, particularly as a child, it brought all of that back up. All of those emotions I felt when those things did happen, there was a resurgence of all of that when this situation came to be. The sexual abuse that I experienced in the past as a child was physical. It was not rape, but there was a lot of other very inappropriate things that took place. And I'm saying that intentionally because for a very long time, I thought if the person didn't insert, then it wasn't sexual abuse. It was, of course that wasn't right, but I'm gonna link a website down below so you can click there and you can read through exactly what sexual abuse is, and you might be surprised to figure out some of the things that are on the list. Here's my point. I did not have to be touched by this man to feel completely violated and betrayed. Once he made his intentions known, I immediately felt a violation. I felt like he had been undressing me every time he saw me. I felt like when he hugged me, he was doing it with one thing in mind while I had something completely different. I'm thinking I'm just hugging him like a dad, a family member, my pastor. And once this happened, it took all of that away from me. And I went back to these moments and just felt so disgusted. I looked at this man like a father figure, y'all. So imagine someone that you trusted for years, that you looked at as a father, like your dad, all of a sudden comes out and says, so yeah, I haven't been completely on the table about wanting to be with you physically, blah, blah, blah. Ugh. So this is what I meant in part one when I said this could have really damaged me had I not been strong enough in my relationship with God. That is not to indicate that someone who has felt damaged by this man's behavior, because again, some people have gone through way worse. This is not to say that if they felt damaged by it, they were not strong spiritually. That's not what I mean. I'm simply recognizing that I could have been in a very different place, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and I may not have handled this the right way, the best way, positively. We all have our issues to overcome. So while I was strong here this time, I have plenty of other things that I'm working on. I have plenty of other areas that I need to be strengthened in. Does that make sense? If you understand what I'm saying, put the timestamp in the chat and say, I got you, girl, or I understand. So can we get candid for a moment? Sorry, my camera got hot, had to switch positions. Anyway, having a history of sexual abuse has caused me to hate myself in one way or another over the years in different ways. I'm not trying to be dramatic here and make it seem like, oh, I'm just so self-loathing. It's not that. It's whether it was my looks, like just hating the way that I looked, hating my weight, hating this about myself, hating that. I know that a lot of that stemmed from the abuse. My self-perception was just totally off. The negative ways it has affected me are also me trying to tone down my appearance, all in hopes of not attracting unwanted attention. And I know I can't be the only one who's dealt with that. Do you know how much that has cost me? It has affected my intimacy in more ways than one. It has affected my marriage in certain areas. I've tried hiding myself in different ways just so my looks or whatever it is about me, so that it wouldn't get in the way. That's just so messed up. I thought if I just toned everything down, if I dressed modestly, if I just focused on being the nice girl, not the pretty girl, definitely not the sexy girl, God forbid, a Christian is sexy, but the one known for having a good heart, not necessarily the one with the best looking face or body. But all of that was just a messed up way of thinking. Because when I denounced that part of me, what I look like, and rejecting a part of myself that God created. And I have rejected a huge part of my femininity for years now, trying not to look and be a certain way just so people would not do exactly what this man did. So when this happened, all of that stuff came flooding back. All of it came back to me. All of it flooded my mind and almost drowned me. Thoughts like, oh, see, that's what you get for smiling too much. See, you shouldn't have been giving hugs. You shouldn't have done this. That's what you get for being so nice. for being so giving. You opened the door to this. And for years, I'm telling you that in a lot of ways, that took my smile, that took my joy. I stopped trying to open myself up so much because it just always seemed like there's been this pattern of someone taking advantage or trying to, when all I was doing was being myself, just purely trying to have genuine relationships with people and people perverting that. I would ask, is there a man that doesn't want to get in my pants? As a woman, I want to be able to be around someone of the opposite sex and not feel like they're taking my clothes off in their mind. And I'm not even saying that from a place of I just think I'm so this and that. That is not what I'm saying. I pulled back so much. I'd wear sweatpants if I met and it was a male and we were meeting up for whatever reason. I'd wear sweatpants and not jeans because God forbid I'm showing my figure. I started to wear bigger clothes overall because I didn't like my body. Then I've had 3 kids and Lord knows it's different now. But do you see what I mean? Do you see what my mind was doing to me for years and what this one situation caused to all come back to me? So I tried all that stuff that I just said, and still somebody violated my trust, violated my space, violated me, which lets me know that that mindset was all a piece of crap. What? I said crap. I had left a toxic church before joining the ministry that I was most recently a part of with this pastor, and he knew that. He knew that I had left an environment that was unhealthy in a lot of ways. And I'm not here to criticize that church. I'm just making a statement. Because truthfully, any environment that we outgrow will become toxic for us. So whether it's that way all along or not, if you stay at a place or space beyond your assigned time frame, it's going to become toxic. Let that sink in. Am I making sense? That church was toxic though. And if you want to know what I'm talking about when I say toxic environments, toxic church environments, leave me a comment. Let me know that you maybe want me to share more on that, because I'll just make that a whole separate video. I won't go into all of that right now, but we can definitely talk about it. Y'all trying to get me in trouble. My point is that my pastor knew all of this. He knew about all of these experiences, and he still did what he did, which lets you know how calculated it was. He knew that I had situations with men in church who would say stuff way out of pocket to me, making comments to me about how they would leave their wife. They would try to say it jokingly, but they would say it over and over. I would go up for prayer at the end of service and they're supposed to be praying for me, but they're whispering in my ear, "Oh, if you were my wife, I'd treat you right." A couple of people requesting photos of me, people hugging me too long, just weird stuff, okay? My pastor knew about all of this, so I can't even believe that he was reckless enough to do the same thing. Literally, the last time I met with my pastor was late December, and I remember crying as I told him that I was just not in a place anymore that I could afford to be around any other person who was not coming into my space with pure motives, that I just literally couldn't take it anymore. I was tired of people using me. I was tired of being taken advantage of in one way or another. Tired of my trust being broken. I didn't have the strongest support system. I'm just like, look, I can't take this anymore. So please, please. And he promised me. His last words to me that day were that he would never do anything like that to hurt me. So if you can imagine, days later, when he did what he did, said what he said, why that would have affected me so much. So in the last video, I mentioned Ravi Zacharias and Carl Lentz, and there were a few reasons for that. One difference that I wanted to highlight that I kind of didn't get to because I went off on a little tangent in the last video was that Ravi Zacharias, I feel, was automatically looked at in the beginning as, oh no, he could not have done this. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact he's an older gentleman. He doesn't come across as, flashy, or he comes across as very fatherly and nurturing and all that. So then, in a sense, Ravi got more sympathy than someone like Carl Lentz, because maybe Carl Lentz has what some people would call sex appeal. And listen, that doesn't have to sound as perverted as maybe someone is thinking it right now. It can just mean that people generally view the person as attractive, Ravi, on the other hand, no, just an older guy, just like I said, like a dad. If I had to put my pastor in one of those categories, he would have definitely been a Ravi. He was someone that we all looked to as like a father. He was so fatherly, so nurturing. He didn't have this boisterous personality. He was very meek and gentle and humble, it seemed. But just like with Ravi Zacharias, he used that to manipulate people. And that's the part that hurts too, just feeling like you didn't know the person and that they were hiding who they truly were. I want to say too that it is never too late for God to redeem someone. My pastor could turn this around. Doesn't mean I go back to the church. Heck no. My point is, he could actually turn his life around, choose to give this over to God, allow God to heal him and work on him, and become a better person. But it's up to him. He has to actually want to turn away from this type of behavior and not keep trying to hide from it or act like it's not an issue. That's pride. We all have stuff. I just wish that he would have dealt with this before it got to this point. So many people in situations like this want to use that scripture that talks about touch not my anointed. It's like, because it's the pastor who's done wrong, you better not speak on it. You better leave that alone. God will come get you if you talk about him. Well, let me be clear. I do respect ministers and pastors, and I just really appreciate all that they're doing. I have a lot of respect for them, okay? But they're not any better than me. They're not any more anointed than someone who, like myself, in your everyday walk, you're just trying to be the best version of yourself by God's design. And I know that sounds blasphemous to some of you, like, oh, how dare she say that she's anointed? If you're walking in your calling and you're doing what God has for you, you're anointed in what you're doing. Point blank, period. So it should not be offensive for you to hear me say something like that. Stop using that scripture as an excuse to not address people who should be addressed when they're doing wrong. So just like we can look at this person or any person in this situation and say, oh, don't mess with that. That's God's anointed. Well, he shouldn't have messed with me because I'm God's anointed. I'm gonna leave you with this. We overcome by the words of our testimony. And every time I share, what happens? She gets free. What that scripture is literally saying to us is that when we share our triumphs, our hurt, our pain, our defeats, the more we share, the freer we become. And what is she trying to do? This girl is getting free. And I'm not gonna let any of you hold me back. Until next time.